Hello students and friends. Today in this homeopathic materia medica, I will discuss about Argentum nitricum. Before start, please subscribe to this channel and press the bell icon for more update. We need support from you to make this channel more beautiful. Argentum nitricum. There are some idiosyncrasies, like for example Argentum nitricum, lachesis, hyoscyamus, anacardium, and valeriana that can be of great use to understand the mode of operation of human mind. The main basic passion of Argentum nitricum is his attachment to his very existence. This isn't, of course, the case of natural survival instinct. Instead, we have to do with a neurotic state dealing with several dangers regarding his existence. This neurotic state involves obsessions not always directly connected to real danger. The essence, the core, and the main idea of Argentum nitricum are obsessions. Point 1. Constant flow of ideas with inadequate filtering. As described in my book about thinking apart from individual thoughts, several external thoughts affect the human function of thinking. It's a normal thing to have many kinds of thoughts flowing into a person's mind. These thoughts could be rational or irrational, common or peculiar, possible or improbable, etc. By nature, there's a certain filtering mechanism that rejects some of them as improbable or irrational and accept others as probable and rational. The latter ones are permitted to go on creating other thoughts, feelings, and behavior. For the sake of understanding, let me give you an analogy. Every single day, many kinds of food are inserted into our stomach, common ones and strange, healthy and unhealthy, beneficial and harmful. Yet, not all of them are absorbed so as to be used by our organism. There's a certain kind of filtering that allows some to be absorbed and some not to be absorbed. For example, cellulose cannot be absorbed and is dumped as non-useful. Some others, like poisons for instance, are considered as harmful and several defense mechanisms are mobilized like vomiting and diarrhea, in order to get them out of our system. 57. A similar filtering mechanism exists on the mental level. The inflowing of external thoughts from the psychic world is filtered by our individual psyche through the functions of judgment and logic. For example, it may happen to all of us, while leaving our house, to have the thought, have I locked the door? The first thing to do isn't to go back and check the door. First we go back to our recent memory and rewind the film of recent events. If we trace the relevant event, then we are sure that we have locked the door and leave in peace without going back to check the door. End of inquiry, end of doubts, end of story. But this isn't the case with Argentum nitricum. He has that constant and tremendous inflowing of individual thoughts from his individual psyche, and that constant inflowing of external thoughts from the psychic world. His mind never stops thinking, it's in constant motion. These thoughts are usually in the form of questions like, for example, could it be that, or what if, and always refer to something negative for the person or to something that the person might have forgotten to do. An Argentum nitricum individual goes back to his recent memory and he finds that specific image, for example the moment that he has locked the door. But still he isn't certain about it and cannot relax. He has lost the ability to be sure about it so as to go on. So he keeps wondering about the same thing and may go back to check the door to be sure. He may even do this a couple of times. First it was an obsessive idea and then it became an obsessive behavior. There are times that after he has checked the door once, he is relieved and leaves his house. But then, after a few minutes, while driving towards his work, doubts haunt his mind. Could it be that I haven't locked the door, or I know I have locked the door, but what if I have left the kitchen oven on? He goes back to his recent memory again and again. And he is not sure if he has done so or not. He may even go back to recheck. It's a vicious circle of obsessions, fixed ideas, persistent thoughts and compulsions that leads to anxiety and compulsive/obsessive behavior. He doesn't have insane ideas, irrational ideas, delusions, or illusions. It's not the case of Hyoscyamus. He doesn't have weak memory or Alzheimer's dementia. He hasn't lost contact with reality like a drunk man or like an intoxicated person from drugs. He has just lost the ability to filter his thoughts. His desperate question to himself is, I know that I haven't forgotten it. I have also checked it more than once. Why, on earth, can't I get the doubt out of my system? Point to obsessive ideas in the form of what if. Let's see some of these obsessive ideas that trouble Argentum nitricum. He goes near the railings of a balcony. Although these railings are high and strong enough, nevertheless, shivering thoughts cross his mind. What if I slip and fall? What if I get dizzy and fall? What if someone pushes me by accident and fall? What if a crazy compulsion takes control of my mind and forces me to jump against my will? He feels as if a magnet pulls him down and he gets anxious and scared. He knows that such things are quite improbable. Nothing like that happened to him in the past. He also knows that the railings are strong and high enough to prevent such an incident. But still he is in doubt and fear overcomes his logic. He may have such a thought even on the balcony of the first floor or even on climbing the first steps of a short ladder. He feels the same fear of heights when in a plane or on a bridge. He may be sitting next to an experienced driver whom he trusts as a person and as a driver. Still he has that obsession that cars moving on the opposite side of the road are heading towards them. His muscles contract, and his feet try instinctively to find the brake pedal to stop the car. He just can't help it. It seems so real and so probable to him. While walking on the pavement he tries to avoid stepping on the margins of the paving stones. He can't avoid reading the numbers on the plates of cars passing by or even adding the numbers. He feels that his hands are dirty or full of germs and wants to wash it all the time again and again. He may do that 20, 30, or 50 times a day. He may even use antiseptics or surgical spirit. He may wash it once and then has that doubt that he didn't do it right, and so he does it again and again thoroughly. His obsessions may also involve his health. As soon as he feels slight symptoms or as soon as he hears about diseases he starts having that obsessive idea that he is sick, that something bad is going on. He rushes to doctors and labs. Nothing can reassure him that he is okay. Phosphor also has this kind of fear about his health, but the latter is afraid only about his health. He hasn't got the obsessions of Argentum nitricum that have to do with all fields of his life. Another obsession of Argentum nitricum is his fear of the evil eye. You see, he just can't explain his compulsive behavior, and it seems probable to him that something metaphysical is to blame. Or is it that he is going crazy? Fear of insanity is just another obsession of his. Point 3. Obsessive behavior. In mild cases we have only obsessive thoughts, but in more advanced ones, these thoughts cause obsessive behavior. Every time he has an obsessive idea he proceeds to a certain obsessive behavior to confront the idea. For example, every time he has that what if question he may touch any object near him, once or 3 times, or say to himself Jesus Christ or Mother Mary in order to avoid anything bad from happening. It's a compulsive action. He can't avoid doing it, he can't help it. He knows that this is a compulsive behavior, his doctor or his analyst has made it clear to him 1,000 times, but still he can't help doing it all the time. It's not a matter of logic. All these torturing fixed ideas make him feel terrible, anxious, full of tension, full of doubts, full of self-reproach, in despair. He keeps having all these crazy thoughts, all these doubts, all these questions, what if? He keeps thinking that something bad will happen to him. He can't do anything about it, although he tried hard again and again, so he starts blaming himself. Why can't you get over this nonsense? His life is hell. That's why he says to himself, am I going crazy, or is it the evil eye? You could expect such thoughts from a low-class, uneducated person, but this is also true for highly educated people and even psychiatrists and scientists. His obsessions may also take the form of extreme tidiness or even fastidiousness. But this isn't the case of Nux vomica. The latter chooses to be fastidious, and she is natural about it, while Argentum nitricum has no choice. These obsessions cause a lot of burden to him. He may become anxious, melancholic, full of misery, loquacious, self-centered or absent-minded. Many times his internal mental state is expressed on his troubled face. When it comes to his physical characteristics, Argentum nitricum often resembles a mild psychotic sulfur person. He is hot grade 2, not as hot as sulfur. Still, he just can't stand being in a hot room without ventilation. He feels choking and wants to open the windows. He may be sweating easily, and his sweat may even be offensive like sulfurs. He is crazy about sweets, desires sweets grade 3 or at least grade 2. He also has that strange characteristic, eats sweet and then salty things and then sweet. He may eat a chocolate and then salty chips and then a cake, and so on. Point 4. Idiosyncratic diagram of Argentum nitricum. Raw material: the mineral silver nitrate. Miasmas. Cyric miasma creates an uncertainty and an imaginative fear for his existence. Basic passions. His main basic passion is his attachment to his existence, involving obsessions for imaginative dangers. Essence: constant inflowing of obsessive ideas in the form of what if questions that causes much stress and obsessive behavior. Thinking. A psychic evolution. He is greatly dependent on his intellectual psyche and on its inadequate filtering of constant inflowing thoughts. Not greatly related to conscience. Psyche. His individual will depends largely on his external will. All the above make his psychic evolution difficult. B. Influences. Intense cyric influence, very much dependent on his mnemonic and external thinking stimuli. Intense negative energy tuning. Stressful conditions. Heights, discussions about diseases, hot rooms, discussions about germs. An evil eye. See general characteristics of mental functions. Quick, scholastic, obsessive thinking, constant tremendous inflowing of arbitrary, torturing fixed ideas with inability to decide about their probability and real nature. D. Mental patterns. His mental patterns relate to his anxious, obsessive, pessimistic state. Frequency. Of medium frequency. Emotions. His general mood is negative, anxious, and torturing. He lives in a hell of mental uncertainty. He feels that his mind isn't working properly and is on the edge of breaking down. Intense negative intellectual emotional charge. He isn't an emotional person because his obsessions force him to deal with himself and become self-centered and full of misery. His main emotions are the intellectual emotions involving fear, anxiety, insecurity, pessimism and melancholy. His emotions may be intense and torturing, but they don't have to do with other people, they have to do with his Obsessions. Behavior. Compulsive behavior due to obsessive ideas, obsessive tidiness. Obsessive fear about health, nervous tics. Usual secondary behavior. Superstitious person, obsessive compulsive, neurotic, grumbler. Neurovegetative person, obsessive tidiness, germ phobia. Anxious, obsessive loquacity. Body. Usual physical predispositions. Dyspepsia, distension, gastritis. Usual psychological predispositions. Obsessive neurosis, nervous tics, phobic neurosis, anxious neurosis. Relative idiosyncrasies. Phosphor, when it comes to neurovegetative symptoms, and sulfur, when it comes to general physical characteristics. Lecture on Argentum nitricum. The idiosyncrasy Argentum nitricum corresponds to the homonymous homeopathic medicine that originates from the mineral silver nitrate. As I have many times explained, this raw material is diluted and succussed many times in order to give us the harmless homeopathic medicine. Argentum nitricum. 0.5 General physical characteristics similar to sulfur. Argentum nitricum's general physical characteristics often resemble a mild sulfur individual. He is hot grade 2 or even less, or even cold grade 1. What's more characteristic is that he feels choking in a hot room and wants the windows open, just like pulsatilla. He may sweat a lot and his perspiration be offensive like sulfur, but at a milder degree. While sulfur is quite slovenly, Argentum nitricum on the contrary is often obsessively fastidious. 0.6 Desire sweets grade 3. Argentum nitricum is often crazy about sweets and sugar. He will eat a lot of it even if it makes him ill. Pulsatilla also is crazy about sweets, but what's characteristic of Argentum nitricum is that he eats sweets, then salty things, and again sweets. He may eat chocolate and at the same time, or seconds after that, eat salty chips and then again sweets. Pulsatilla and Argentum nitricum may prefer sweets instead of food. They are fond of cakes, ice creams, chocolate, candies, etc. Pulsatilla also may become ill from too many sweets. 0.7 Obsessive ideas and compulsive behavior. The essence of Argentum nitricum is fixed ideas and compulsive behavior. Most people suffering from compulsive neurosis are Argentum nitricum subjects. But be careful. That doesn't mean that any patient with compulsive neurosis will need Argentum nitricum. This isn't idiosyncratic homeopathy, this is allopathic homeopathy prescribing remedies according to diseases. You have to give the medicine that suits the whole and especially the personality of the patient. Why does Argentum nitricum have these obsessions? What's the mechanism that causes them? It may happen to all of us to have some thoughts crossing our minds at times, like, I saw a black cat, something bad may happen, or have I locked the door? Nevertheless, if we are balanced, our psychological defense mechanisms function effectively, and after double checking such a possibility inside our minds, we let it go and relax. Well, Argentum nitricum has trouble double checking his thoughts. He just can't overcome that what if, or that have I. He is in constant doubt, although most of the times he recalls the image of the action for which he is in doubt. It's not an irrational thought, nor is it an insane thought, a delusion, or an illusion. He is not psychotic. He is simply obsessive. When we have to do with an insane thought, the patient not only has lost track of reality, but moreover he doesn't realize that he is insane. He thinks that all others are insane except him. The obsessive person lives in reality and knows that he is sane, but still he is not sure about recent facts, whether they took place or not, or is afraid about improbable things. 0.8 Obsessive fear of heights and fear of insanity. Let's examine some of these obsessions. Fear of high places, grade 3 or 2. If we want to be precise, we should say that this isn't fear, it's but an obsession that has to do with high places. Thuja also has fear of high places, but not an obsessive one and in a lower degree. You ask him, if you go out on a balcony and look down, from what floor do you start becoming afraid, and he will answer you, even from the first/second floor. Then you ask him, what are you afraid of, and he tells you, I don't know. I am afraid that I may get dizzy or slip and fall off, or that the railings will yield, or that someone may push me by accident. In a more advanced state, at phase C, he may tell you that he is afraid that he may have the compulsion to jump off the balcony. It's not that he has suicidal tendency, not even suicidal thoughts. It's simply an obsession, a fixed idea of the kind what if. He is often afraid that he might become insane, that he will lose his reason. He doesn't want to hear stories about people that got crazy or about psychological diseases, because he says to him, what if these obsessions drive me towards insanity? His obsessions seem to him so strange and so inexplicable that he often says to himself, have I been bewitched? Is it a case of evil eye influence? As expected, due to his obsessive personality, he may often be a superstitious person. 9. What if? He is so full of what if thoughts. What if this happens? What if that happens? He never stops thinking about negative things to come. On leaving his house, office, or car, he starts thinking, have I locked the door? He goes back to check it and it's okay, he didn't forget anything. Then he makes a few steps towards the street, suddenly another what if crosses his mind, I have locked the door, but what if I haven't turned the kitchen oven off? He turns back again to check that also. It doesn't have to do with his memory, he hasn't got weak memory, and it's not the beginning of Alzheimer dementia. There are times that in order to be sure, before leaving the house he double checks and triple checks the door and the kitchen and the windows, and during this check he tries to be fully aware of what he does. Sometimes, he even says loudly what he's doing in order to print it in his mind with bold letters, I am now locking the door, now I am turning the kitchen oven off. Now, he knows that he is exaggerating, but he just can't help it. Now let's see some more obsessions. He walks down the road and tries to avoid stepping on the margins of the paving stones. Whenever he sees a car, he just can't stop himself from reading the numbers on the plates or even calculating their sum. He also counts the steps wherever they exist, or counts 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. whenever waiting for something to happen or someone to come. He gives the excuse to himself that he is doing something normal, just waiting the time to pass, but it's not a normal thing if you just can't avoid it. Sometimes, whenever he looks up to a high building, he feels dizzy. At other times he may avoid a certain route just because he had that hint that something bad will happen if he goes towards that direction. Quite often he is very superstitious. 10. Compulsive movements, nervous tics, germ phobia. When things have progressed to a much more imbalanced state, not only he has fixed ideas, but he also has compulsive behavior and compulsive movements. He regularly touches instantly the desk in front of him. If he doesn't do it, he feels so bad, he has to do it so as to relax, but then after some seconds or minutes he has to do it again and again. Sometimes a thought crosses his mind that if he doesn't do it, something bad will happen to him. Other times he just feels bad if he doesn't do it. Argentum nitricum, especially kids, often have many nervous tics that keep changing all the time as weeks or months go by. He may raise his shoulders regularly or blink or touch his hair or anything you can imagine. As long as it's a sudden, repeated movement without any meaning or purpose. He often has germ phobia. The term in this case isn't the right one. It's not a phobia, i.e. a fear, it's an obsession. He may wash his hands 20, 30 or 50 times a day. He may wash it now and immediately start thinking, what if I haven't washed it thoroughly? So he goes back and does it again more thoroughly and even using soap or surgical spirit. He avoids using the toilet in other houses or in public buildings. If he has to go to the toilet, then he uses a handkerchief in order to avoid touching the door's knob. He will thoroughly examine the plates, spoons, forks and glasses at a restaurant to see if they are thoroughly washed. If he is sitting next to a driver, he is also driving with him, stepping on a non-existing brake, watching the road carefully, and often feels as if cars from the opposite line are heading towards them. He drives the driver next to him crazy by his remarks, watch out, be careful, or slow down. Be careful not to confuse this with another situation that hasn't got anything to do with fear or obsession. Lachesis, being syphilitic and domineering, may use her fake fear as an excuse to dominate on her husband or children, showing to them that she cares so much about them because she has that pathological love for them. In homeopathy, it's always very important to judge the intention of the person that lies beneath an action and not the secondary behavior per se. We have to reach to the diagnosis of the genotype/primary behavior and not to the diagnosis of the phenotype/secondary behavior. 11. Anxiety while waiting. He is so anxious while waiting. Sometimes, if he is waiting for an important event to come, then he may have nervous frequent urination or nervous diarrhea. But, usually his anxiety is off seconds or minutes after the event takes place. It's anxiety while waiting. If he is expecting an important event to happen tomorrow or in a few days, then he keeps thinking about it all the time or asks questions to others around him about it all the time until it happens. Lycopodium is also very anxious whenever he is expecting an important event or whenever he has to talk in front of an audience, even if he is well prepared for it. But his stage fright begins only some minutes or hours before the event takes place and lasts only some minutes after the beginning of his speech, and he does very well on the process. Silica dreads to appear in public and carry on a presentation. She is very anxious before, during and even after the presentation. Many times she avoids such presentations on any cost. 12. Obsessive fear about his health. Argentum nitricum often says that he is afraid about his health. We have to differentiate between his fear and the fear of phosphor and arsenicum about their health. In the case of Argentum nitricum, it's not really a fear, but an obsession about his health. A thought crosses his mind, what if I have a severe disease, and from that time on this becomes an obsession. And he starts rushing to doctors for consultation and to labs for tests. The general and characteristic thing is his general tendency for obsessions, and the specific and not characteristic thing is his obsession fear about his health. Phosphor, on the other hand, has a clear fear about his health because his neurovegetative nervous system is malfunctioning. So, he has several neurovegetative symptoms, and these cause great fear and anxiety to him. Because he thinks, not to say he is certain, that he does suffer from a severe disease. Somebody told him that a neighbor had a stroke, and then he immediately started having neurovegetative symptoms, and he is sure that he is also going to have a stroke or a heart attack or something sudden and severe. He rushes to the doctor, and the doctor examines him and tells him You've got nothing pathological. It's all in your mind. You are simply hypochondriac. He is so offended and angry when they tell him so, because he does feel those symptoms and he is a very sincere person in general. He says, "Why don't you believe me, doctor? Why on earth would I lie? I worked hard for years and never left my job, apart from severe causes. I do have these symptoms. I swear to you I have them." The doctor prescribes pills, taps him on the shoulder and reassures him that he is going to get well. He is relieved for a while and then he has again the same symptoms and again he rushes to the doctor in despair. He isn't so much afraid of death, he is afraid of the symptoms or that he may have some severe disease. Argentum also has fear about his health, but this is a part of his general fear about death. His is such an egoistic and self-centered person that he is very much afraid of stop existing. So he doesn't like hearing about old age, death, and diseases. Argentum is also intensely afraid of death, but this usually begins after a sudden fright from an extreme event. It's mostly an acute condition and an extreme one because he is afraid that any minute he will die due to his extreme physical symptoms. Phosphor is not so much afraid of death, he is mostly afraid of the symptoms that he has. Whenever he feels symptoms he rushes to the doctor for help. He wants consolation very much, is easily reassured, but then he is also worried again, and this goes on like that. Although he is calling the doctor a lot and visiting him all the time worried, nevertheless, he is a likable person because he is sincere, and very grateful. You empathize with him because he is like a good small child seeking for consolation and guidance. On the contrary, Argentum creates negative feelings to the doctor, because he is syphilitic, egoistic, mistrustful, mean, and peevish. Argentum nitricum isn't as repulsive as Argentum, but still he isn't so likable as Phosphor because he has that misery and that attachment to his obsessions. Argentum nitricum, due to his obsessions, is often nervous and anxious. He feels his belly very much distended and is complaining about it all the time. He is also very restless. While sitting he has to do something with his hands or move his feet all the time. This is the general picture of Argentum nitricum. Our aim in miasmatic idiosyncratic materia medica isn't to give a full, complete, detailed picture of an idiosyncrasy. This would create difficulty in memorizing information and even confusion, and we would easily miss the essence of the idiosyncrasy. If you identify the core, the essence, the skeleton of any idiosyncrasy, then you can add all other less important information. And this tactic is in accordance with the law of hierarchy and the law of whole. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe and share this video. Have a nice day.